Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Is the audio okay for everyone?
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nashtaprayeshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevayam Bhagavatyutama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki Yam Pravrajantam Anupetam Apeta Krityam Dvaipayana Virahakatara Juhava Putreti Tan Mayatayo Taravo Binedus Tam sarva bhuta hridayam munimanatosmi. Hare Krishna, dear devotees, attendees of this series of classes about the structural review of the topics of Srimad-Bhagavatam. And I want to remind you the main idea of these classes. We're trying to understand in a very general way how different subject matters described in the Srimad-Bhagavatam all serve the ultimate purpose, explaining the nature of the absolute truth, and how without understanding these topics, we will never be able to properly understand the absolute truth. Okay, so as I explained before, we're trying to understand the different topics described in Srimad-Bhagavatam in connection with the main topic, which is the nature of the absolute truth. And Srimad-Bhagavatam is designed in a very special way, facilitating us to understand the absolute truth, even though it's virtually impossible. The absolute truth is totally transcendental, it's adokshaya. So how we can understand the absolute truth? There is only one way to understand the absolute truth, this is love. Love transcends the limitation of human intelligence. Otherwise, in our attempts to understand the absolute truth, we will always be baffled. We will never be able to understand it properly, and that's we see in the history of religion. People, they have certain conception of the absolute truth, but oftentimes it's very caricature, because they're applying their imperfect intelligence to understand the absolute truth, and the result is less than satisfying. So Srimad-Bhagavatam is removing certain obstacles from within our heart, clearing the space within our heart, which will enable us to develop attachment to the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Absolute Truth, and by this attachment, which is called love, we will be able to understand the Supreme Truth. But before, these obstacles have to be removed. So the 9 cantos of Srimad-Bhagavatam are preparing us to the culmination of Srimad-Bhagavatam, the essence of Srimad-Bhagavatam. Nārada Muni told Vyasadeva, you didn't describe properly the pastimes of Lord Krishna, even though pastimes of Lord Krishna are described in all the Puranas. Krishna Charita and Rama Charita, Ramayana and Krishna Lila are described practically in all the Puranas. Nevertheless, Nārada Muni said, you didn't describe them properly. What does it mean properly? Properly means in such a way that the readers or listeners will be able to understand these pastimes. Otherwise, we will hear these pastimes and then we will have some perverted reflection within our mind, then some, some whatever reflection. Usually people think that impersonal absolute comes as Krishna and performs his pastimes because, people need some entertainment and they're bored in meditating on the impersonal Brahman. So, in between the meditation, when they're bored, they should hear some pastimes or something like this. They have different conceptions, different ideas. They don't understand that these pastimes are the very essence of the Supreme Absolute Truth. That this is the manifestation of the internal nature of the Supreme Absolute Truth, and how this internal nature, which is complete love or love, manifests through these pastimes. Anyway, so that's what it means to describe Lord's pastimes properly, in a proper sequence, preparing us to understand them in the real sense of this word. So we already explained the topic of the first canto, very important, Adhikar Tattva, second canto, which describes different sadhanas, how people with different adhikar or different qualification can perform different practices. And then third and fourth canto, basically according to the Krama theory, that the topics of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam are described in a chronological order, atra sarga visargascha sthanam poshanam utayam. They describe sarga and visarga, and basically they describe sarga. It's a primary creation, but it's also the creation of the primary impetus within the heart. And the root impetus within the heart of every living entity is the desire to enjoy. So, and the third canto describes how this desire to enjoy material nature manifests in living entity and how we can curb this desire, how this the spirit of exploitation of material energy can be clarified from our heart, can be washed away from our heart. And the fourth canto, as we described last time in the lecture, is explaining the other problem when people try to enjoy in a more subtle way, in a Vedic way. All these subtle Vedic sciences are there, and people foolishly think that this is to facilitate their enjoyment. So they're not gross exploiters of the material nature, but they're subtly doing the same. And therefore, very important quality appears within the heart, which is pride. We were talking last time that the pride is the byproduct of this Vedic way of life. And therefore, there are so many instances in the fourth canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam which describes different kind of offenses. So that's also one of the most important topics of the fourth canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, to warn us again against offenses which are born from our pride, and create some humility in us. So we're coming to the third topic of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam according to the consequential order of the structure of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. That is sthanam. And the main place where this topic is being revealed in the Srimad-Bhagavatam, even though this topic is all over the place, everywhere, but the main canto where it is revealed is the 5th canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam. So today I will try to give a short, essential review of the themes of the 5th canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam and how the 5th canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam serves the ultimate purpose of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. But before starting this, I will read a verse from the 5th canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam, from the 1st chapter, and wonderful purport by Srila Prabhupada, which may be a little long, 2 pages long, but nevertheless it's very important. So this is the verse number 14 from the 1st canto of first chapter of the 5th canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam, the activities of Maharaja Priyavrata. Yad-vāci tantyāṁ guṇa-karma-dāmabhiḥ sudustarair vatsa vayaṁ suyojitāḥ sarve vahāmo balim īśvarāya protā nasīva dvi-pade catuṣ-padaḥ. Very beautiful verse. My dear boy, vatsa, all of us are bound by the Vedic injunctions to the divisions of varṇāśrama according to our qualities and work. These divisions are difficult to avoid because they are scientifically arranged. Suyojitāḥ. Sudustarair vatsa vayaṁ suyojitāḥ. Yad-vāci tantyāṁ guṇa-karma-dāmabhiḥ. We all are tied by these ropes of guna and karma. We all are not free, even though we have an illusion that we are free. But the ropes of guna and karma very tightly bind us in this material world, and therefore we should follow sudustarair vatsa vayaṁ suyojitāḥ, scientifically arrange the system given by the Supreme Lord. Yad-vāci. Yad-vāci means from the Vedic instruction. So we must therefore carry out our duties of varṇāśrama-dharma like bulls obliged to move according to the direction of a driver pulling on ropes knotted to their noses. You know, in a traditional Vedic system, there is a rope and a nose. Bulls are quite insensitive animals, but they have very sensitive part. This is their nose. So the drivers of these bulls, they put the rope there, and if the bull goes little away from the proper path, they pull the ropes, and the bull, feeling the pain, impossible pain, goes back to his path. So, purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vijnana Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. In this verse, the words tantyāṁ guṇa-karma-dāmabhiḥ are very important. We each get a body according to our association with the gunas, the qualities or modes of material nature, and we act accordingly. As stated in Bhagavad-gītā, the 4 orders of the social system, namely brāhmaṇa, kṣatriya, vaishya and shudra, are arranged according to guṇa and karma, their qualities and work. There is some controversy about this, however, because some say that since one receives a body according to the guṇa and karma of his past life, it is one's birth that determines his social status. Others say, however, that one's birth according to guṇa and karma of his past life is not the essential consideration, since one can change his guṇa and karma even in this life. Thus, they say that the 4 divisions of the social order, brāhmaṇa, kṣatriya, vaishya, and shudra, should be arranged according to the guna and karma of this life. This version is confirmed in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam by Nārada Muni in the 7th canto. While instructing Mahārāja Yudhiṣṭhira about the symptoms of guna and karma, Nārada Muni said that these symptoms must govern the division of society. In other words, if a person born in a family of a brāhmana has the symptoms of a shudra, he should be designated as a shudra. Similarly, if a shudra has brahminical qualities, he should be designated as a brāhmana. The varṇāśrama system is scientific, suyojitāḥ. Suyojitāḥ literally means very beautifully and intelligently designed. Therefore, if we accept the divisions of varna and ashrama according to the Vedic instructions, our lives will be successful. Unless human society is thus divided and arranged, it cannot be perfect. As stated in the Vishnu Purana, varṇāśrama-dharma puruṣena parah puman Vishnur aradhyate pantha nandyattato shakaranam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, is worshipped by the proper execution of prescribed duties in the system of varna and ashrama. There is no other way to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One must be situated in the institution of the 4 varnas and ashramas. All of human society is meant to worship Lord Vishnu. At the present moment, however, human society does not know that there is an ultimate goal or perfection of life. Please listen very carefully. At the present moment, however, human society doesn't know that there is the ultimate goal or perfection of life. Therefore, instead of worshipping Lord Vishnu, people have been educated to worship matter. According to the direction of modern society, men think they can advance in civilization by manipulating matter to build skyscrapers, big roads, automobiles, and so on. Such a civilization must certainly be called materialistic because its people do not know the goal of life. The goal of life is to reach Vishnu, but instead of reaching Vishnu, people are bewildered by external manifestation of the material energy and ultimately reach hell. Srila Prabhupada doesn't write this, but it is written in this 5th canto. Therefore, progress in the material advancement is blind, and the leaders of such material advancement are also blind. They are leading their followers in the wrong way. It is best, therefore, to accept the injunctions of the Vedas, which are mentioned in this verse as yad-vāci. Yad-vāci literally means the words of him. In accordance with those instructions, everyone should find out whether he is a brāhmana, kṣatriya, vaishya, or shudra, and should thus be educated accordingly. Then his life will be successful, otherwise all human society will be confused. If human society is divided scientifically according to varna and ashrama, and if the Vedic directions are followed, one's life, regardless of his position, will be successful. It is not that brahmanas will be elevated to the transcendental platform, but not the shudras. If the Vedic instructions, injunctions are followed, all of them, brahmanas, kshatriyas, vaishyas, and shudras, will be elevated to the transcendental platform and their lives will be successful. The injunctions of the Vedas are explicit directions from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The example cited in this verse is that bulls tied by ropes to their nostrils move according to the direction of the driver. Similarly, if we move according to the instructions of the Vedas, the perfect path of our lives will be set. Otherwise, if we do not move in that way, but act according to our whimsical ideas, our lives will be spoiled by confusion and will end in despair. Very strong language Prabhupada uses. Actually, because people at the present moment are not following the instructions of the Vedas, they are all confused. We must therefore accept this instruction by Lord Brahma to Priyavrata as the factual scientific direction leading to the success of life. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad-gītā. Yah shastravidim utsrija vartate kamakarataha nasasidim avapnati nasukam na param gatim. If we do not live according to the instructions of the Shastras, the Vedas, we shall never achieve success in life, to say nothing of happiness or elevation in highest statuses of life. Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhakti Vijnana Goswami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yantah pravishya mama vachim mam prasuptam sanjivaya takila shakti daraksvadhamna anyamscha hasta charana shravanat vagadim pranannamo bhagavate purushaya tubhyam. Swasyastu vishwasya kalah prasidatam dayantu bhutani shivam mithodhiya manascha badram bhajata tadokshaje aveshyatam no matirabhyahaitu ki. So, we will begin our short and very cursory description of the 5th canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam, which is a very important and very essential canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam. And I will begin this description with a very unusual quote. I will quote the great German philosopher Immanuel Kant, who said a very famous phrase in his treatise, which is called Critique of Practical Intelligence. He said that there are two things which always inspire great awe and reverence within me, and the more I think of them, the more inspiration I feel. That is the starry heaven over my head and the moral law within. So why do I start with this strange and apparently irrelevant quote? Because the 5th canto is about these two things: the starry heaven above our heads and the moral law within our heart. And Immanuel Kant, being a great philosopher, he intuitively understood that this is a crucial topic for any civilized or intelligent human being. These two topics are crucial for any civilized human being to understand, to live the proper life in this world. So these two topics, the moral law within and the structure of the universe, are the main topics of this 5th canto, and they are intimately connected. And actually, Srila Prabhupada gave great importance to this 5th canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam. He actually said that, he said to Harikesh Prabhu at that time that he should study this 5th canto and write his own commentaries on the 5th canto, scientifically studying it. And Srila Prabhupada said to his members of his Bhaktivedanta Institute that they should scientifically study this 5th canto, because the 5th canto, not the 3rd canto. 3rd canto is very important to understand the primary creation, but to understand the mechanics, the gross mechanics of this world, is very important to be properly situated in this world and in this life. He said, you just study this, and this should be the core of our scientific presentation. And in fact, if we look back in the history of humanity, we can see that it is these two topics which turned human civilization, turned the course of human civilization in Kali Yuga. Before Copernicus system was discovered, and before Charles Darwin came up with his brilliant evolution theory, the human civilization was, or human society was basically God-centered. But because Copernicus came out with this heliocentric system of the universe, structure of the universe, which we don't really argue with, but there is a very essential changes in our understanding of how universe works. And before Charles Darwin didn't come up with this idea that we ultimately came from the dirt, that the human being is nothing but dirt, and there's nothing really essentially divine in a human being, because we just came through the evolutionary process, and and from amoeba or whatever, and therefore we're not really much better than amoeba. In fact, amoeba must, according to Satkarya principle, must contain human beings. Human beings, they're less than amoeba because they're the result of amoeba. Amoeba is more than human being. Anyway, so before these two brilliant discoveries of the modern science, the human society was essentially God-centric. But after that, there was a very, sharp U-turn in the whole course of human civilization. And therefore, Prabhupada, he insisted so much. He said that we can change the course of human civilization if we establish these topics which are described in the 5th canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam very firmly and scientifically. I try to understand and try to preach these topics. So therefore, for us also to be Krishna conscious or to be spiritualist, we have to understand this. And we also have to understand the connection. The connection between these two topics which I indicated in the beginning, the moral law within and the universe above our head, is also very clear. It's actually in these two topics which I mentioned, two discoveries of the modern science, quote-unquote discoveries. It's also like this. When Charles Darwin, he didn't say that we came from monkeys. He only indicated that we came from monkeys. It's Aldous Huxley. He said we came from monkeys, but basically it's denying of the moral law. When we say that we are a product of matter, it basically means that there is no moral law which we should abide. And first was Darwin, then there was Huxley, his lieutenant, and then there was Freud. And Freud, basically, he really put everything in place. And he said, that's it. We are monkeys. We should behave like monkeys. So this is the connection. These two topics are connected. And in the course of my description, I will make this connection even more clear. Therefore, the first part of this 5th canto, from the superficial point of view, it continues the Visarga part of the 4th canto, because it describes the dynasty of Maharaja Priyavrata, who was the second son of Swayambhuva Manu. Swayambhuva Manu had two sons, Maharaja Uttanapada and Maharaja Uttanapada. His son was Dhruva, and his dynasty was described in the 4th canto. And in the 5th canto, the continuation of the same topic about Maharaja Priyavrata, the second son of Swayambhuva Manu. But immediately from the outset, the tension or the conflict in the very first chapter of the 5th canto is about Maharaja Priyavrata, who wants to renounce the world, whereas he is not really ready to renounce the world. And actually that's very important for us as neophyte devotees, because as neophyte devotees we all experienced, went through, suffered through, and made others suffer through our period of false renunciation. So from the other side, point of view, the first topic of one of the main topics of the 5th canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, in connection with this moral law within, in connection with this strict law which we all have to obey, which is ordained by the Lord, and which is coming from the Lord through the Vedas, through the words of the Vedas. So in this connection, the main thing is this premature renunciation. As beginning devotees, we all, as I said, went through this. We all just want to jump ahead, jump over our heads, which is not possible. So this 5th canto is about the false renunciation and the proper renunciation, and the consequences of both. Very, very important topic. And therefore it starts with this chapter where Maharaja Priyavrata is being preached by Lord Brahma himself. And Lord Brahma, in the verse which we read, he says that there is strict laws. And if you follow these laws, you will live comfortably in this life, you will not suffer. But if you try to deviate from these laws, which are ultimately coming from the Lord himself, that's his manifestation of his own nature. These laws are not artificial. They're natural laws because this is the extension of Lord's nature. So if we live according to these laws, we will live comfortable life. We will not feel too much sufferings in this material world. We will not end up in the hells. Because ultimately, let me go a little back, rewind a little bit, how these two topics are connected, the structure of the universe and the following of the laws. If one follows the laws of material nature, the laws of his own nature, according to his guṇa and karma, then he will be elevated within this universe. His consciousness will go up and up and up. It will develop, it will bloom. And if one transgresses the laws of material nature, he will be degraded, devalued. Instead of evolution, there will be devolution of his consciousness, and ultimately he will end up in the hell, which will be described in the last chapter of this canto. So it's a very logical progression from the first canto, which establishes this topic that we have to follow the strict laws according to our guṇa and karma, according to our psychophysiological makeup, to the last chapter of this canto, which describes the consequences of not following this very strictly, of trying to whimsically avoid. And in this particular verse, it is beautifully described by this comparison. We are like bulls. We are like bulls. And these laws are like ropes. And as soon as we deviate, we feel pain. As soon as we deviate, we create havoc around us. We inflict pain to other people. But if we obediently follow the will of the Lord, which is manifested as these laws of social order, then we will be able to develop internally. And this internal development within this framework of the social arrangement, so to speak, is also described here. So the neophyte devotee or somebody with very superficial understanding, he tries to externally change his situation. Whereas the somebody who is more internal, and this is the teaching of the fifth canto, the teachings of the fifth canto is to impress upon us, as dull as we are, that if we follow the rules and regulations of varṇāśrama-dharma, of our nature, if I'm a male, I have to behave like a male. If I'm female, I have to behave like a female, and not something like, if I am brahmachari, I have to behave as a brahmachari. If I am grihasta, I have to behave as a grihasta. And there is no tatastha ashram. Some people, they want to be tatastha. Little bit brahmachari, little bit grihasta. To get the best of all worlds. So there is no tatastha. Because if we situate it properly, that's sthanam. That's the third topic of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Sthanam means, as I explained, boundaries. Stito stitam, srutigatam tanuvan manobir. Just stay in your place, don't change your place externally, and try to develop internally, as Prabhupada explains in this purport. In this purport, he says that there is no bar for Shudras to go back to Godhead. Anyone can go back to Godhead. There is no restrictions in this regard. If he understands externally, I have to be situated in my proper place. Stito stitam. Shrutigatam tanuman manobhir. Internally, I have to develop by listening the topics of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and by trying to understand ultimately the 10th canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So that's the crux of this issue. Therefore, this topic is called sthanam. Sthanam basically means boundaries. And boundaries means many things. Boundaries means internal boundaries. The internal boundaries is this moral law within. Because when we transgress this moral law, we transgress these boundaries, we immediately feel pain. We immediately feel now conscious becomes inflicted and affected by this, and we feel pain. If we transgress this moral law within. Externally, there is also boundaries. And these boundaries are manifested in this universe as different planetary systems. As I explained in the beginning, when we, in a very general way, describe these 10 topics of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, I explained that basically this third topic of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is that Vaikuntha Vijaya, the Lord of Vaikuntha, Uparvala, as they say in Hindi, Uparvala. This Uparvala, the Lord of Vaikuntha, he, the Supreme, who is above our head, he maintains all the boundaries. He keeps us in proper place, and if we try to jump over our head, if we try to change our position prematurely, without deserving it, in a very whimsical way, instead of evolving, we will be devolving. Instead of promotion, we will be demoted. So that's how it works in this material world. So stanestitam, this sthanam means the boundaries. And the Lord himself maintains the boundaries. Therefore, we have to respect these boundaries. We have to very clearly understand our own boundaries, our own limitation, and act within these boundaries. And not try to transgress these boundaries and try to act in a different way, in artificial way, as is very fashionable in the modern world. In the modern world, there's no boundaries. There is one world, as they say, you know, one big village, no boundaries, no nothing, so anyone can do anything, you know. The one who is born as a male can become female, and vice versa, and you know, one who is born black, he can become white. You know, as somebody joked about Michael Jackson that he was born as a black male and became a white female. You know. But what is the result? Hell. The result is hell. The result is suffering. And God has nothing to do with this directly. You know, he set these boundaries. He said, please respect these boundaries. Please obey according to the laws which are there, and then you will not suffer. But if you wish to transgress these laws, no problem. I created a very special place for you. This is 21 hell. Beautifully, graphically described. So yeah, this is the place for those who don't respect the boundaries. No problem. You know, we are very liberal. We can accommodate anyone. Those who respect the boundaries and those who don't. There is place for everyone. For them, there is a special place. So this is how the topic of fifth canto develops, and how important for us it is to understand this fifth canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And we first, of course, have this story about Maharaja Priyavrata, who didn't want to enter into the family life because he thought he is more elevated, he is Paramahamsa. And you know, even Nārada Muni was on his side. But then Lord Brahma himself, but his father, Swayambhuva Manu, said, no, he knew his son better. He said, no, you should enter Grihastha life and you should enjoy life. And in the meantime, develop internally. So this is one example, the first example in this fifth canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, how Maharaja Priyavrata ruled. And he became so powerful. And that's amazing. That's one of the side effects of following the rules and regulations. If you follow the rules and regulations, your power will increase, your influence will increase. If you don't try to artificially transgress it. But vice versa, if you try to artificially transgress it, your sphere of influence will shrink. It will become less and less and less, and you will become good for nothing. You will become totally useless human being. But if you strictly and humbly obey to these laws of material nature, set up by the Lord himself, and therefore they are divine laws, then you will gradually increase your power. And Maharaja Priyavrata became so powerful. But it's very important to understand the irony of this. Because in the beginning it is said that Maharaja Priyavrata was a pure devotee. He didn't need to go to Grihastha life. He wanted to become a brahmachari, to remain a brahmachari. He was so inspired. And then all of a sudden he obeys the order of Lord Brahma. He marries his wife. And all of a sudden it is explained how he was attached to his wife. Because he was attached. Even though artificially in the beginning he saw that I'm more advanced, I don't need it, I don't have to go through it, but ultimately this attachment was there, and it was much more proper for him to go through it. And therefore his name is Priyavrata. Priyavrata means that there may be different translations of this word. Priyavrata means that he is, strictly, he's very loyal to his wife, Priya. He's obedient to his wife. It also means that he follows this very pleasant vratas of grihastha life. He strictly obeys to the rules and regulations of grihastha life, whatever translation may be there. But ultimately, he of course feels dissatisfaction and renounces this world. And right after that, it's a very interesting story. In the 2nd chapter of the 5th canto, the story of one of his sons, Maharaja Agnicdra, is being described. And his son, it's a completely different story. His son, he didn't want liberation. He wanted to go to hellish planet, actually. Because Pitriloka, well, sometimes it is said that it is it is heavenly planet, but sometimes it is said it is hellish planet. He wanted to go to Pitriloka and live there due to his undue attachment. The essence of the 5th canto, you follow your nature and gradually you will be able to elevate spiritually. But if you develop either undue detachment or undue attachment, both are bad. Both undue detachment and undue attachment, artificial detachment and attachment are all bad. Ultimately, you will go down. You will go to Pitriloka or whatever. And it's a very beautiful 2nd chapter, which is almost like, it's very unusual to read the 2nd chapter and to hear the 2nd chapter from the mouth of Shukadeva Goswami, because this basically the bulk of the 2nd chapter of the 5th canto is Maharaja Agnicdra is trying to seduce Purvachiti, the Apsara, who came to seduce him. So basically, this 2nd chapter is how the male and female are trying to seduce each other, and how he's flattering her and how she's behaving. It's a funny kind of story, which is unfortunately describes our situation in this material world. And it contains very valuable lessons for every one of us. So this is not the essence of life. The essence of life is to follow the strict rules which are set, the boundaries which are set by the Lord of Vaikuntha. But another, of course, explanation of this Vaikuntha Vijaya, this third topic, is that if one is a devotee, then the Lord, who is Vaikuntha Vijaya, he will never forget his devotee. Even if one somehow or other transgresses the rules of moral behavior, still the Lord remembers about him, and the Lord ultimately will save him. That's the meaning of Vaikuntha Vijaya. Vaikuntha, the Lord, and this is of course exemplified in the story of Maharaja Bharata, how Maharaja Bharata, even though there was a temporary, he fell down, it looks like he fell down, but ultimately even this falling down was for his evolution. So if somebody is a devotee, even if he commits a mistake in this path, there is actually no loss if he tries to understand the lessons behind it and go according to these lessons and not to commit the same mistake again. So, and then of course after that, in the 3rd and 4th chapter, there is the description of the appearance of Maharaja Rishabhadev. Maharaja Nabha was the son of Agnicdra. And even though Agnicdra was not a very exemplary personality in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Still, nevertheless, his grandson was Rishabhadev. So again, he must be very elevated if his grandson was the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. So this description of Rishabhadev is being given there. And it's interesting that in the descriptions of Rishabhadev, the description of his avadut life is given. Actually, in two places in this fifth canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, the avaduta order of life is being described. Jada Bharata, in his next life, Maharaja Bharata became Jada Bharata, and he behaved like an avadut. Avadut means, literally, ava means look down, and dut means is basically transgressing the very basic rules of the civilized society that is taking baths every day. Avadutas, they are not supposed to take baths. And they're doing it purposefully. So it is explained that at one point, if you follow the rules strictly, you can transgress all these rules. This is what is exemplified in the life of Rishabhadev and to a certain extent in the life of Jada Bharata. So that's the rules and regulations are according to your level of development of your consciousness. If your consciousness is developed enough, you don't have to follow any rules. And this is what Maharaja Rishabhadev is the example of. But at the same time, it's very carefully said by Shukadev Goswami there that Maharaja Rishabhadev, when he was urinating and when he was it's interesting that Maharaja Rishabhadev, he lived his life in a palace with all his sons, very civilized life, 100 sons, beautiful palace. And then, all of a sudden he renounces everything. He gives the throne to his elder son, Maharaja Bharata. And he starts living in the same palace, but completely naked. Your grandfather all of a sudden decides to take the avaduta order of life, and he lives in the same flat with you, but he goes there naked, and he behaves in a very strange way. And then Maharaja Rishabhadev, he of course lives home, and he wanders through the villages, and people, they deride him and they urinate at him, but he himself is so pure, he doesn't really notice even it. And he's so pure that even his stool and urine, they smell like flowers. So please don't try to become avaduta before your stool smells like roses. If you're not on this level, so remain in a civilized society and follow the rules and regulations of this life. At one point you will be able to do it, no problem, but don't be in a hurry. So, and then, of course, the fifth canto, I came a little ahead of time. The fifth canto, the fifth chapter of the fifth canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam contains this very beautiful instructions of Maharaja Rishabhadev to his sons. And the essence of these instructions is tapodivyam putrakayana sudyam, that this human life is meant for tapodivyam. The human life is not meant for enjoyment. The human life is meant for the divine tapasya, for the divine austerity, for the purification, yana shuddhyat. By this we will be able to purify our soul. The human form of life is very important. later on in the second part of this 5th canto, it will be the demigods will be praying to the inhabitants of Bharatavarsha, of our plane of existence. And they will say that you're very fortunate, because even though you live such a short life, extremely short life, within this short life you will be able to fulfill the mission of human life. You will be able to understand everything. You will be able to perform these austerities. And if you understand that these austerities are actually very nice because they are enlivening for the soul. If we always try to enjoy, it's a very burdensome. Those people who try to enjoy, they become so morose and so depressed. That's the side product of the enjoyment, depression, total depression. But those people who live happily within the boundaries and try to perform appropriate austerities, not the dry austerities, not the austerities outside of the boundaries which are set for them, they become very enlivened and very nice. And therefore, this is the essence. He gives very valuable instructions to his sons, which is one of the main topics for the beginner devotees, actually, to understand properly these teachings of Lord Rishabhadeva in the 5th chapter of the 5th canto. And it's also interesting, the next 6th chapter describes how he ended his life, how he was burned in a forest fire. It is said that the place where he was burned in a forest fire was in Karnataka. There is still this mountain which is called Kulachadri. And it's a very, the jungle is there, very dense jungle is there. So supposedly in this Kulachadri mountain, Rishabhadev was caught by the forest fire and he burnt away. And Shukadev Goswami explains that actually by this ending up his life in the forest fire, he set an example for yogis who want to end up this life properly, and they have to actually burn themselves, not literally, but they burn themselves in the fire of yoga and leave this world without even noticing it, completely indifferent to the needs and pains of material body. But it's also interesting that one of his sons, Maharaja Arhat, his sons or his... not his sons. One of the kings which saw Maharaja Rishabhadev and was inspired by his example, he started imitating Maharaja Rishabhadev. He saw this extreme renunciation of Maharaja Rishabhadev, and he created a new religion from the behavior of Maharaja Rishabhadev, which has become Jaina religion. Jaina religion is famous for this extreme renunciation and asocial sort of attitude. And Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam condemns this act of Maharaja Arhat, saying that this is ultimately atheism. The essence of the 5th canto, which is Sthanam Vaikunta Vijayam, is to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by following His laws. And if we reject His laws, even though we reject it, with some ideas or whatever, and externally it is very, paka renunciation, it's very, very pure. Shruti Smriti Puranadi Pancharatra Vidhim Vinay Kantiki Harer Bhaktim Utpatanaiva Kalpate. It will only create Utpatanaiva, Utpat. It will only create the chaos in the society. Shruti Smriti Puranadi Pancharatra Vidhim, not Vina, Saha. We should live according to the Shruti Smriti Puranadi Pancharatra Vidhi. We should build our life firmly on these vidhis of the scriptures, and not to transgress it in a whimsical way as the followers of Maharaja Rishabhadev do. Even though externally they may seem very renounced, but the goal of their life is to become God. They say that, yeah, there is a gradual evolution, and if you become Jaina, you ultimately will become Arhat, and then you ultimately will become God. You will become Narayana. And you will create your own universe, and you will become the supreme Narayana in this universe. So you will rule this universe and this and that. So those who reject Vedas, they are Pashandis. They are Nastikas. Even though whatever externally or superficially pure life they may live, ultimately it's not beneficial for the soul. It's totally counterproductive. It's very, very degrading for the soul, because it creates a very huge pride within. Therefore, humbly we should obey to the laws of material nature according to our psychological nature. And therefore, till the 15th chapter, including starting from the chapter 7, the story of Maharaja Bharata is being described. Very beautiful story of Maharaja Bharata. By the way, it's also interesting that it is explained that among the 100 sons of Rishabhadev, some became brāhmanas, some became vaishyas, some became sannyasis, renunciates, Navayagendras, the sons of Maharaja Rishabhadev. Bharata was kṣatriya, some were, brāhmanas, some were even not shudras, but vaishyas, I believe. So again, that's the essence of the fifth canto. That's a very interesting detail of the fifth canto, which proves that this is what the fifth canto is all about. Stane stita, remain on your place according to your nature. And Srila Prabhupada explains that there are two different theories how we should follow varṇāśrama. One theory of varṇāśrama is that we strictly obey to the acquired nature from the past life. Another one, we should obey or follow the acquired nature, the nature which we developed in this life. Yeah, one is from the past life, another one from this life. But no matter what, which one we go, we may be elevated to a certain extent, but we should also respect our nature and follow according to our nature and develop internally. And that will be very important teachings of this section of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. How to remain within the boundaries, respect the boundaries, and at the same time develop internally. So the activities of King Bharata is being described, how he ruled, again very properly, his kingdom, which was very huge, and how he performed sacrifices, he did everything. And then ultimately he retired from the family life. So externally, it may look like that he did everything properly. He didn't try to jump ahead, to jump over his head. He didn't try to transgress the rules. He was ruling properly. He properly renounced his life. He went to the forest. He started living in the forest. But as some acharyas explain, there are different explanations of why did it happen to him. Why all of a sudden this amazing attachment appeared in his heart towards a living creature, little deer which he saved. Some say because even though he lived in a seclusion, in renunciation, he lived in renunciation, he lived proper life, but he didn't have the higher association. That's some acharyas, this is how they explain his fall down. Even if we do everything properly, we still need some driving force within our life to elevate us. Some elevation force within our life has to be there, because only in this way following the rules of and regulations of varṇāśrama will be useful. Otherwise it will be useless. You will only acquire pious credits, and these pious credits will not really develop you spiritually. So varṇāśrama is designed in a very specific way, so that human beings would follow their nature, but at the same time have the facility to associate with those who are higher than them. And that's one of the reasons he didn't have this association. Jiva Goswami gives another explanation, which is also very beautiful and also very instructive. He said that this inordinate attachment which he all of a sudden developed towards this little deer living in the forest, practicing very elevated sadhana, worshipping sun god Surya Narayana on the level of bhava, with the tears in his eyes and the hair standing on end, even though he was such an elevated status, all of a sudden this kama jumped out of his heart. This kama, it is clearly said that this kama, it may be not a very, common way of manifesting kama, lust, but nevertheless, his attachment to the deer was lust. And that's another very important little thing I will say. But Srila Jiva Goswami, to finish this topic, he said that this unexpected appearance of the lust within the heart, very powerful lust within the heart of Maharaja Bharata, was the result of his previous offense. The offenses, that's the problem with the offenses. Offenses have very lasting effect. The effect of the offenses, the samskaras which offense leave within our consciousness, are not easily eradicated from our consciousness. And therefore, after so many years of very proper life within the forest, and before that very pious life as a king, Maharaja Bharata, according to Jiva Goswami, all of a sudden developed this, because that's the danger of offense. Offense leave a very, very deep impression, and we have to be always careful and always remorseful, understanding that we, unwillingly committed so many offenses, and try to, with the tears in our eyes, try to wash away the results of these offenses. But a very interesting thing I wanted to also mention in this connection, why this varṇāśrama-dharma is so important in connection with this sudden appearance of kama or lust within the heart of Maharaja Bharata. Varṇāśrama is such a system which helps you to minimize the influence of lust, to overcome lust. If we follow very strictly varṇāśrama system, it is said very clearly here in the 5th canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam that by following the rules of regulations, you will gradually become free from the influence of lust. Otherwise, you will remain a victim of lust. And unfortunately, this is what happened with Maharaja Bharata to instruct us. There is nothing wrong with Maharaja Bharata. We should not be condescending when it comes to such an elevated personalities, but we have to understand that this is about us. So it's very interesting also, Prabhupada uses this in translation of the 5th canto, I don't remember exactly where, but Prabhupada uses a very beautiful phrase, the society of envy. And it is literally said there that if we want to enjoy in the society by social life, we create around us the society of envy. This is beautiful. This is a very profound concept. We can see around us the people they want to enjoy. They create this society where they can, show off how their opulence and their, beauty and their whatever. But that's the society based on envy. And as a result of being a member of this society of envy, we suffer. We want to enjoy, as a result of it, or to do this, in order to do this, we create around us the society of envy. And naturally we suffer, because how we can be happy if we are living among the people who are envious? All the people in the normal society, they are envious. And they're trying to harm, to inflict pain to each other. And therefore they are suffering. So therefore, what is varṇāśrama? Varṇāśrama is the society devoid of envy. It's not the society which is divided according to some medieval rules. The details of Dharma can differ greatly. Details of Dharma, they're different in different areas of even Bharatavarsha in India. In the south, there is one rules of varṇāśrama. In the north, there are other rules of varṇāśrama. But the details, the principle is that that's the society without envy. That's the society where everyone is trying to elevate by serving the Lord and trying to come to the Lord. And sometimes we can see the attempts within our society to build varṇāśrama. Very dangerous attempts, I would say, because people are trying to build this varṇāśrama society without understanding that we first have to uproot the envy. We can only build the proper social structure which will be elevating for the soul, for every member of the society, no matter where they are, if there is no envy in the interaction of the people. Otherwise, it will be a very Jesuit type of exploitation. It will be exploitation. Brahmanas will exploit others, kshatriyas will exploit others, vaishyas will try to exploit others, shudras will suffer. Ultimately, shudras will create revolution, and they will overthrow brahmanas and kshatriyas and vaishyas, and then they will exploit brahmanas and vaishyas and kshatriyas and rule themselves, and everything will be hellish. This is what we have seen in Russia and in some other countries, how they do this, in China, all this hellish stuff which is going on. Why? Because there was stratification in the society, there was some sort of varṇāśrama, but because this varṇāśrama was not properly built, not according to the inner idea of varṇāśrama, where everyone has to worship the Supreme Lord and respect others according to their positions. In the proper varṇāśrama system, the Shudra who is performing his duty, he's more worshipable than the Brahmana if he is deviating from his duties, even slightly. But in improper varṇāśrama system or any, surrogate varṇāśrama system or whatever, some artificial varṇāśrama system, there will be always pride. I am Brahman, I am higher than you. Look at my Brahmin thread. Did you see it? Here it is. By the way, you know your place, and so on and so forth. Horrible stuff. And as a result, we will have some person with glasses called Ambedkar who will come and create the new constitution of the society, and that's a very logical result of improper application of these principles of varṇāśrama. Before I go, okay, let me finish this story with story of Maharaja Bharata, and then before going to the second part, which starts from the 16th chapter, I will say something also little something important. So the story of Maharaja Bharata, of course, everyone knows. He goes to forest, he develops affection to the deer, and he dies by remembering the deer. And he's born as a deer in his next life because his last life was, he was remembering at the last moment of time this deer. And therefore he became a deer. And that's Vaikuntha Vijaya. Lord Krishna, Vaikuntha, Vaikunthasya Vijaya, he never forgets his devotee. He never forsakes his devotee. Even in this very difficult situation, he reminded this deer about his previous life. And this deer, even though usually the deer body is very ignorant and the consciousness is covered, in this body of the deer, he remembered his past life. And he went exactly in the same place where he was performing austerities before. But the difference was that he found some other people, some other renunciates, and he was living near them. He didn't trust his mind. He said, no. I developed affection to the deer in my past life. In this life, I have all the facilities to develop more affection for the deers, for she-deer. And in this way, continue my journey. So he lived together with other ascetics, other rishis, in this Pulaha ashram near Gandaki river in Himalayas, where Shalagrama Shilas are being worshipped. And he was very austere deer. He was living in the ashram. He didn't trust the seclusion life. Therefore, life of seclusion. Therefore, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, he said that, if you try to do Nirjan Bhajan, it's just all bogus. Don't do it. Don't do it. Live in the society. Even if you are renunciate, you still need a society of other people, of other elevated Vaishnavas. And by living in this situation, in this environment, you will be able to progress properly. And then, of course, he dies by pronouncing the name of Krishna. Krishna, this deer, which is not very common for the deers to chant the holy name. But that's the proof. Srila Jiva Goswami uses this example as a proof that the holy name is transcendental. It's not that the deer, his voice cords are not capable of producing this sound, Krishna. But nevertheless, he produced this sound. Why? Because the sound came upon him, came through him by the mercy of the Lord. In a similar way, we shouldn't hope that we will be able to produce the name of Krishna by all our vocal cords. No, only by the mercy of Krishna, at the last moment of our life, we will be able to say Krishna, because the name of Krishna will descend upon us due to our sincerity of purpose. And then he becomes Jada Bharata, and there is this, Jada Bharata, chapter 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. So many chapters, 7 chapters of this 5th canto. Half of the first part of the 5th canto is the description of Jada Bharata and his conversation with King Rahugana. And what is the essence of this conversation? It's exactly this, what I already said, that the King Rahugana, it's the development of what I said. I already mentioned it, but it's development of what has been said before. What has been said before in the previous chapters is the importance about following the rules and regulations of varṇāśrama. But starting from this, by the instructions of Yada Bharata with King Rahugana, there will be another turn of this topic where Yada Bharata will explain to King Rahugana, who is a pious king within varṇāśrama system and who actually advocates normal varṇāśrama. The whole discussion initiates from the question of Maharaja Rahugana. You said that your spirit soul, that's okay. You said that you're not thin, you're not thick, you're not tall, you're not this, you're not that, and I am not your master, you're not my servant. That's fine. That's the spiritual consideration, but we live in this society. And in this society, I am a king. And you are my palanquin carrier. And in this society, even though the soul doesn't feel fatigue, the body still feels fatigue. And because the soul is within the body, the soul feels fatigue of the body. How is that you are trying to describe this transcendental philosophy, but it doesn't seem to be practical? Let's be practical. In this material world, we have to be practical. It means that we have to respect this varṇāśrama system. So that's what I have been saying before. Now we have another step in a proper direction, because if it was only what has been said before, it would not be proper understanding. The proper understanding, yes, you follow the rules and regulations, but at the same time you have to understand that these rules and regulations are given to you only for this one purpose, to develop internally and not to waste your energy into this lust. If you try to transgress the rules and varṇāśrama, then your whole energy will be dissipated in the, in all these lusty activities. But if you try to follow the rules, you will conserve the energy within. What you will do with this conserved energy, which is within yourself, you will be able to use this energy for internal development. And this is the meaning why 7 chapters in this canto are being devoted to this conversation. First, there is a conversation between Yada Bharata and Maharaja Rahugana. Then they finish the conversation, and Maharaja Parikshit looks at Shukadeva Goswami and says, I didn't understand everything. Can you repeat it to me? Can you explain it to me in more details, what he means, all this forest of material enjoyment, this and that? And Shukadeva Goswami starts from scratch, and he repeats in a more elaborate way the instructions of Yada Bharata to King Rahugana, how to develop internally by externally following the rules and regulations. That's a very important part of this whole thing. Otherwise, there will be society of envy. Otherwise, inevitably, the varṇāśrama, the external form of varṇāśrama, the external skeleton of varṇāśrama system will be turned into some ugly social mechanism, which actually happened, unfortunately, here in India, and therefore the Vedic culture is suffering now, and therefore the Vedic culture has such a bad name among ordinary people in India, because they're afraid. They have complete allergy to all this brāhmaṇa, vaishya, kṣatriya, and shudra, sanatana dharma, all these phrases, even though it's so important itself. So before coming to the second part, when did I start? 11 o'clock, so I have to finish soon. I will very briefly describe the second part, but before going to the second part of this fifth canto, I want to say a few more words about the varṇāśrama system. Actually, starting from Rupa Goswami, Gaudiya Vaishnavas were not very favorable toward varṇāśrama, because varṇāśrama was always viewed as an impediment to spiritual development. It's only starting from Bhaktivinoda Thakur where he explained the proper role of varṇāśrama. That varṇāśrama is the protective covering of the internal development. And if the protective covering is not there, the internal development will also be very difficult. It's like, if you take a mango and you take off the peel of the mango, and the normal mango will stay there intact nicely for 1 week, and nothing will happen with it. It will. But if you take the peel out of the mango, it will become rotten very soon. It will rot very soon. So yes, varṇāśrama is external, but it protects the internal development. And therefore, this explanation in this chapter's conversation between King Rahugana and Jada-Bharata teaching King Rahugana, hearing him, is so extremely important, essential for us to understand how to combine these two things. How to follow externally and how to develop internally at the same time. And what I wanted to say is that I read recently a very beautiful article about the history of Christianity, written by one Christian philosopher who is naturally very sympathetic to the Christian idea. And he explains his understanding why ultimately Christianity, again, don't misquote me, I'm quoting him, failed. It didn't fail in many regards, when we take the lives of elevated saints in Christianity, definitely they developed something. But nevertheless, in the from the historical point of view, it did fail because it didn't really fulfill the original purpose and the original energy was dissipated. And his idea is exactly this. He said that the reason for this, the cause of it, is because they didn't, the Christians somehow or other were not able to create the spiritual society, the social structure which would facilitate the spiritual development. And because the social structure which would be congruous and harmoniously connected with the spiritual development was not built, ultimately this whole, historically, there was unfortunately some degradation took place. So that's a very, very difficult task. And that's why Bhaktivinoda Thakur said varṇāśrama is so necessary. That's why he actually asked his son Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati to do this mission. That's why Prabhupada said about this. And that's why we cannot do anything about it, because it's so difficult. It's really difficult. It's difficult to do it in a hostile environment. And it's difficult to do it because there are so many misconceptions, because people are trying to take details of varṇāśrama and elevate these details of varṇāśrama as the principles of varṇāśrama without understanding the basic principles. The basic principles are the basic moral values, which is absolutely ahimsa and honesty and non-violence and honesty and purity. So what is it? Truthfulness, non-violence, purity. What is the fourth one? Austerity. Austerity, yeah. That's the pillars of this whole thing. But, there are so many other principles. The cardinal compassion, for example, the cardinal moral values, which are within our heart. And we can recognize that we follow these values by the satisfaction which we feel in the heart when we follow them. And we can recognize that we transgress this moral law within by the ugly feeling which we have, by the sufferings, internal sufferings which we have. I did something wrong. I shouldn't have done this. Why? This feeling is there. So to build varnāśrama, actually we have to take all the rules of Shruti and Smriti and Puranas. But what Puranas are teaching us, what Itihasas are teaching us, the main teaching of Puranas and Itihasas in general is this cardinal moral values. This great moral values of compassion, of service, of humility, of austerity, of truthfulness, of non-violence. All these things are there. Different examples are there. Ramayana is about this. Mahabharata is about this. This is the cardinal laws. And when people take Dharma Shastras are secondary. When people try to build varnāśrama according to the design of Dharma Shastras, neglecting these cardinal moral values, which is the basis or foundation of this moral law within, from which we start, then there will be a failure. There will be something which is not very good, not very good. It will be exploitation in the form of varnāśrama. But if we build on these cardinal values, which are there also in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, and then try to see how the secondary rules of varnāśrama described in Dharma Shastras are applied to the modern time, to the modern capacity of human beings, according to our really capacity, our strengths, and our, the strengths of our mind, the strengths of our body, and everything else, then only we will be able to build this. And then only we will be able to flourish. If we will not be able to do it, then, we will fail. We will fail. No doubt about it. We may not fail on a personal basis. Many people will be benefited on a personal basis. But nothing will change substantially in the society if this sort of society we will not be able to build and to show the example. That's a little bit, it's a very controversial topic. I know that I will be condemned by many people but by saying this, but I still thought I need to say this. Varnāśrama is very important, but what is the basis of varnāśrama, of the moral law? It's these cardinal values, cardinal moral values, which have to be established very firmly within our heart. That will be the sthiti. That will be the proper position of the human being. Sthanam. That is our place. That's the firm foundation from which we can start building our life. So, and then just very briefly, because there is no time, the last chapters of the 10 chapters of this 5th canto, from the 16th, 11 chapters to 26, 11 chapters, they are describing the sacred geography. And as I said, this sacred geography is connected with the internal boundaries which we have. This is external boundaries, external levels of development, external structure. And the main point to understand is that we are living in the universe which is built by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by His will, according to the design to teach us. that's the place, that's the school, that's the place where we can be promoted, and where we can be demoted, or when we can have evolution and we can have devolution. Both things are there. And it's all inhabited. It has many dimensions. I'm not going to explain this multidimensional model. I don't understand it myself very clearly, but it definitely has more dimensions than we will be able to see with our eyes. According to Shukadeva Goswami, there are so many planets, so many inhabitants, but it so happened that the place where we live is a very important place. It is called Karma Bhumi, the place where we can perform karma. It is also called Dharma Bhumi, the place where we can perform dharma, not just to perform karma, but to perform karma according to our dharma, according to our psychophysiological nature and the laws of dharma. And if we perform karma according to our dharma, we will be elevated. And the advantage of those human beings who live on this plane is that they can perform dharma and karma, whereas inhabitants of higher and lower planes, they can only enjoy the results of karma. We can change our situation drastically. Other souls who are either in a lower position or in the higher position, they can only enjoy or suffer, whereas our middle position is very advantageous, because from this middle position we can, by following this internal development and externally following the rules, we can be elevated to the entirely different, completely spiritual plane of existence. Whereas while remaining here, we will remain and going back and forth in this 14 planetary system, always in horizontal development. First, the horizontal structure of the universe is explained, Bhumandala, and then the vertical structure of the universe is explained by explaining what people are doing on a 14 planetary system. So this whole beautiful picture is there for us to really understand that this is where we are. And when we look up in the heaven and see all the stars, we can understand, yes, people are living there. Dhruva Maharaj is living there in Dhruva Loka, and he is serving the Lord. And so many rishis and so many human beings so many beings are worshipping the Lord. It is not just the sacred geography, not just the sacred universe, it's the universe which worships the Lord. The picture which is depicted in the 5th canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is that everyone in this universe is worshipping the Supreme Lord. In different dvipas, in different varshas, they worship the Supreme Lord in their own way, in their own capacity, according to the level of their consciousness. And we can also worship the Supreme Lord by following the great acharyas. And in this way, we develop our spiritual potential, the innate spiritual potential. So, as I said, there is no time, but also maybe it's not even so much necessary to describe all the details, because I'm doing a very general overview of the whole canto, so that we can understand the essence, what is the message of this canto. And of course the 26th chapter, the last chapter of this, describes the different hellish planets, sufferings which are there for those souls which don't follow the rules. The rest of the inhabitants, they worship the Lord, But those who don't want to worship the Lord, no problem. There is a nice place for them to. They can be very absorbed in different events which are taking place there, and it's not a very. It's a very exciting place. Once a French philosopher, Voltaire, was asked what he preferred, the heaven or hell. He said that the weather in hell is better, but the company in heaven, the weather in heaven is better, but the company is better, is more exciting in the hell. So he's probably enjoying the exciting company in the hell of people. You know, we have free will, we can choose. It's not, and we have to understand really that this is not the punishment as such. It's a natural outcome. When we transgress the rules, we find ourselves in hell. That's simple. And if we follow the rules, we are in heaven. We don't need to wait when we go to hell or to heaven. We can develop this sort of conditions within and without either by obeying the rules or following the rules, obeying the nature which we have, following the nature, which is ultimately the reflection of the higher nature of God. Obeying the natural laws which are there. So I guess that's it. I have been speaking long enough to bore yourself to death. So I probably have to finish. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. You know, the messages that we have got are very different than you just said. No one is bored to death at all. It has been very uplifting, and then we have a few questions, if you do allow.
Yes, please.
There are 2 or 3 good questions, you know, that have been asked both on YouTube and Zoom. So I'm going to do that. So first, let's ask this question, which comes from Anupama Radharani Mataji from Dubai. And the question is, Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my respectful obeisances. In our devotee community, there are people of different qualities as per different varnas. ISKCON focuses mostly on developing brahmanical qualities of all its members, irrespective of their natural inclination. How do we understand this in the light of what you spoke about sticking to our boundaries? That's one part. The next, and how do we find out what varna we belong to? Should we follow the rules and regulations of that particular varna and practice Bhakti Yoga? That's question number 1 from us, or in 2 parts.
Sometimes the culture of varnāśrama is called Brahminical culture because irrespective of one's varna, we follow the Brahminical values, or at least we respect the Brahminical values. So by studying Srila Prabhupada's books and studying the scriptures, we're trying to develop at least this quality, respect to Brahminical values. We may not become philosophers as Vrajavanita Dasi said in her comment, which I just read. And we may not become philosophers, very few become philosophers, that's a fact. But at least people in ISKCON, they developed the respect towards the philosophy, the philosophical attitude towards life. And ultimately, Brahminical values and spiritual values, they have a lot in common. That's why the varnāśrama social system is congruent with the spiritual development. every other social system is more or less based on a different set of values. It may be a Vaishya set of values, commercial values, so to speak, where the money is the most, like the modern society. It's the general value system. And everyone, no matter who you are, you may be brāhmana by birth, but if you are in this society, you will be forced to adapt this value system, Vaishya value system. There may be some dictatorship, and in the dictatorship or whatever, some kṣatriya rule system. Then, the kṣatriya system is the general system for all the people, no matter which varnas they belong. So varṇāśrama is the social system where the Brahminical values are important for everyone. Everyone respects them, no matter who they are. They try to develop certain Brahminical qualities to a certain extent, which is not possible for everyone, of course. But also, this sort of general development is there. But at the same time, we have our nature, and therefore, in ISKCON, we unfortunately didn't develop this sort of education. The only education which we developed, you're right, is Brahminical education. But Prabhupada did want varṇāśrama college education, different style of education. Together with the core Brahminical knowledge, ABCs of spiritual life and Brahminical understanding, so to speak. There will be some other education which will develop other qualities according to the nature. So it's unfulfilled mission. Prabhupada wanted it. It's as much unfulfilled as the whole varṇāśrama idea, unfulfilled and misunderstood. Hopefully we will be able to do it. Hopefully we will have enough intelligence to do it before we disintegrate due to the varṇāśrama arguments which are there in our society. Hopefully we will figure out what we're supposed to do. So what was the second part of the question? That was the first. How to develop nature, how to recognize one's nature. There are different instruments and mechanisms, but basically, what you're most inclined to do, what you're doing when you are free and when you don't have too much time, when you don't have too much engagement, what you would do. Would you read a book, or would you, I don't know, of course, probably, all of you probably will do some internet video, something like this, news. But astrologers can help. They can show you. The problem with our nature is that nature is very much mixed. We don't have very pure natures. Very rarely we can see people with pure nature. When people have pure nature, they don't ask these questions. They don't ask, how do I understand? They understand. There is no doubts. But because we have different forces, some forces pulling in this direction, some forces pulling in that direction, it's sometimes difficult, but still, nevertheless, we can understand the main forces and try to develop them. The point is that the nature can be developed. If we have basic nature, some certain inclination to learn, or inclination to teach, or inclination to worship, that's Brahminical nature, or inclination to manage, inclination to, set up some systems and structures, kṣatriya sort of nature, or inclination to, do some business and to gain profit, then we can develop these natures. By associating with those people who have strongly developed nature, by taking educations from them, and by exercising this nature. That's the main point. So don't spend too much time by trying to understand the details of your nature. Have a very general understanding, which is not difficult by defining your general inclinations and then try to develop this nature. And that will push away some secondary, so to speak, natures. And, the proof that you're doing the right thing will be satisfaction. If you do something wrong, you will not be satisfied. You will be miserable. If you are miserable in doing what you're doing, if you are, if you don't like your work, your job or whatever, if you hate it, try to think what you're doing wrong. Maybe you're not following your nature.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj. That was very apt and to the point, to the question that Anupama Radharani asked. Now we have an interesting question from YouTube and two more from Zoom. So I will ask one from YouTube. This is a little longish but very interesting question. Question is, to develop our relationship with Krishna, we practice Vaidhi Bhakti. We are fully aware that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead with all powers and opulences, but also we know that our goal is to have an intimate relationship with the Lord like the inhabitants of Vrindavan. And they are not aware that Krishna is God, because that is a hindrance for the sweet relationship. Therefore, there comes a switch that we are under the influence of Yoga Maya. Gradually, if we practice properly, or how it works, that at one point we can have this very special relationship like the inhabitants of Vrindavan. In the sense, how do we, from Vaidhi Bhakti and this, so there's a switch, if I've understood the question correctly and also related it correctly, Maharaj.
Yeah, it's actually not so difficult.
Yeah.
It's an important question. Thank you very much. So the answer is simple. Why the form of bhakti which we follow is called Vaidhi? Because there is certain element of fear. We do it because we have to do it, because otherwise we go to hell, because otherwise, we will suffer this and that. So this element is there, especially in the beginning. And therefore, there is some sort of force applied to us, which we feel. Sometimes we don't feel like doing this, but, we still feel some pressure. Social pressure, if we live in a temple or whatever kind of pressure is there. Or sometimes we feel, sometimes people, they don't like to read Prabhupada's books because they feel so much pressure from the books, heavy pressure. And they don't want to hear philosophy. Recently I spoke with one disciple of mine. She said, I can't hear this philosophy any longer because she feels so pressed and guilty. And that's why it's called Vaidhi. But the essence of Vaidhi is the bhakti, whether it's Vaidhi or Raganuga, is the same. It's Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. Whether we follow Vaidhi or we follow Raganuga, we will hear. We will remember about the Lord. We will talk about the Lord or glorify the Lord or do kirtan of the Lord. We will do archana in a different way, with a different mood. We'll do the same. So what happens when we do this Vaidhi Bhakti by being little pushed or forced into this, and at the same time we are associating with people who have taste, then gradually their taste is being reflected within our heart. As I explained, that our heart has the reflecting capacity, and when the heart is little cleansed due to the following rules and regulations of Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, when the heart becomes a little more clear, it starts reflecting the taste of other people. First, it will reflect the taste of our guru, you know, those people whom we respect very much. Then we will be able to see this bhava in other people, and ultimately we will be able to recognize the same emotions, glaring emotions, while reading Srimad-Bhagavatam. And the emotions of the eternal inhabitants of Vraj will be reflected within our heart. Nitya Siddhasya dharmasya, no? Huh? Bhavasya. Nitya Siddhasya bhavasya. Prakatyaṁ hridi sadyata. The bhava of Nitya Siddhas will manifest within our heart. Prakatyaṁ hridi Nitya Siddhasya bhavasya. Prakatyaṁ hridi sadyata. So at one point it will, and usually the stage, when we're talking about switch, it's not really switch, it's a gradual development. The more we practice Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, the more taste we develop. The more taste we develop, the more spontaneous our approach becomes, the more selfless it becomes. And the level of ruchi, all of a sudden very strong taste comes, but it's not our taste yet. It's the reflected taste of those elevated devotees with whom we associate. And from this level on, we are eligible to practice more elevated kinds of sadhana. But internally, it will be completely different. It will be absolutely different ball game. Externally, it will be the same. We chanted before, we will chant after. We remembered the Lord before, we read Bhagavatam before, we will read Bhagavatam after, we will remember the Lord after. It will all be the same, but internally it will be completely different. So it's just a question of purifying the heart by association and by following the spiritual practices, by basically association with transcendental subject matters such as holy names, Srimad-Bhagavatam, devotees of the Lord, archana of the Lord, or holy Dhamma of the Lord. Haribol?
Yes, no, I'm just pulling out the questions from Zoom. Now there's a question from Ramananda Kanai Prabhu from Muscat. His question is, nowadays we see many devotees going for organic farming and considering it as varṇāśrama system. Is this to be considered as first step towards progressing varṇāśrama system?
It's a good step in the right direction. I don't know if this should be the first step or not. You know, people may move externally, they may change the external circumstances, but if there is still some sort of envy within the heart, some sort of rivalry within the heart, then they will go. I for some time lived in a farm in Sweden where people were trying to do some varṇāśrama project, so to speak. It was not very successful because the community didn't really develop. The community spirit didn't develop. The organic farming was there. Community spirit was not there. There was no proper relationship, and that's the farm is still there. It's a nice project. It's a nice project, no doubt about it, but it's not. You cannot really call it a varṇāśrama because there is no different social social development, so to speak. So organic farming is not the foundation of varṇāśrama. It's an important activity of people who live in varṇāśrama to do pure food, because the food should be pure. It's important because when the food is pure, then there's more chances that the heart will be pure, no doubt about it. But it's not all in all. You know, so many people do organic farming. They don't become bona fide members of varṇāśrama.
Thank you, Maharaj. We have one more question from Rasamai Madhavi Mataji. And the question is, how can we follow vanaprastha in present age?
How can you follow vanaprastha at present age? What is vanaprastha? Let's take, naturally you will not be able to go to forest and, live in a hermitage. You will be immediately deported from the forest, and the fire department will fine you for trying to lit the fire in the forest. And there will be so many other problems. But what is vanaprastha? Vanaprastha is a certain stage where people developed some sort of spirit of renunciation by performing austerities, are trying to burn out the impressions of their sense enjoyments, which they went through before. So austerities, the need for austerities in vanaprastha life is because while you live attached life, quote unquote, you are engaged, so socially engaged, and have so many other things, you develop a lot of negative emotions due to unwanted social interactions. So much envy is there, so much greed is there already developed, so much lust is there developed, so much anger is developed. All these negative emotions are there. So before the last stage of our life, which may be sannyasa or it may be vanaprastha, we have to make a program which will purify our heart from all these negative emotions. That's the essence of vanaprastha life. So what do we do to purify our heart, our consciousness from all these negative emotions? Otherwise, all these negative emotions, unfulfilled desires, they will surface at the moment of death, and they will determine our next life. Unless we do some extra endeavors. So there are different programs which can be designed. Either you can, go to... the best way, of course, to purify yourself from negative emotions is to teach others. Because naturally people have some inclination to do it when they become mature in age. But also, you can go to holy place, you can serve the cows, you can serve the sadhus, you can serve the holy place, you can have your little flat in the holy place. You can also live in the same place where you are living now, but dedicate yourself completely to this sort of service, which is the real austerity. Serving others, helping others to develop spiritually, whatever your inclination is. So that's, according to my humble opinion, would be the proper vanaprastha life here. In grihastha life, you have to enjoy. You have to set your goals. These goals are not necessarily purely spiritual goals. You have to achieve something. You have to earn money. So many things you have to do. But, by doing this, you also create some unwanted things. So vanaprastha life is to purify the heart from all these unwanted things accumulated in the period of grihastha life. And the best way to do it is by serving others, serving cows, serving elders, helping others, and doing, of course, it in a spiritual way, trying to develop other people spiritually, or, serving the holy Dham, whatever it is.
Very much, Guru Maharaj. And one last question from YouTube, if you don't mind.
Okay.
This is from Alisha Israni, and her question is, why did Chaitanya Mahaprabhu reject varṇāśrama in his conversation with Ramananda Roy?
No, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't reject varṇāśrama in his conversation with Ramananda Roy. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that varṇāśrama is external. He wanted to get his question, please quote a shloka to Ramananda Roy. Please quote a shloka which will describe the sadhya, the goal of human life, according to the scriptures. That was the exact question of Ramananda Roy. And when Ramananda Roy, his first attempt was, he quoted this verse from Vishnu Purana, which Prabhupada quotes in the varṇāśrama-dharma. So the way to please the Lord is to be in varṇāśrama. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, I go by him. This is external. This is not the goal. This is not the eternal and internal goal of the soul. The eternal and internal goal of the soul is to develop love. Varṇāśrama is a form. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not reject varṇāśrama as the form of life. Therefore, he accepted the verse stane stita shruti gatam tanuvan manobir. Gyane prayasya mudapasya namante eva jivanti sanmukaritan bhavadiya vartam. Stane stita shruti gatam tanuvan manobir. Ye prayasya jita jita pyasita strilokyam. Specifically, it is said in this verse, according to the commentators, of course, there may be different explanations of these two words, tanestita. You remain where you are. It basically where you remain in your place in the society, in your varna, in your ashrama, not change it. So he rejected varṇāśrama as the goal of life. And we have to be very clear, varṇāśrama is not the goal in itself. It's not the spiritual goal. It's a means. It's an important means for us to achieve the goal, and I explained the place of this means in my whole lecture. I'm not going to repeat it. It may not be even the most important means, but nevertheless it's an important means or an important aspect of our life. As I said, at a certain level of spiritual development, you can reject varṇāśrama, as Rishabhadev rejected. He became Avaduta. You can reject it, no doubt about it, but only on a certain level. Before this level, you need this as an instrument. It's like the example is given: if you have a turn in your foot, then you take another turn, and you take this turn by another turn. So you ultimately have to take, you have the turn inside your heart, some problems, some envy, some bad qualities which are there, some bad emotions which you accumulated. So you take some external things, and by applying these external things, you will be able to get rid of these problems within your heart. So he didn't reject varṇāśrama as such. He rejected it as a goal of life, but he didn't reject it as... Because his question was about the goal of life, not about the means to achieve this goal. He even actually, in one sense, he rejected even sadhana bhakti when Ramananda Roy quoted this verse, tanestita shruti gatam tanuvan manobhi. He said, yes, it's okay, but go further. So in one sense, he also rejected this. Even though we say this is the first step which he accepted. But he said, no, it's okay. he was not even particularly happy about this. He said, hi, okay, it's okay, go further. Only a couple of steps further he says, Bhala, this is very good. When Ramananda Roy started saying about Sakyaras, he said, this is the first time, even when Ramananda Roy said about Dasyaras, he said, Bhala, it's okay, no problem. No, he didn't say Bhala, he said, hoy. But then he said, when Sakyarasa first was quoted, he said, oh, this is uttam, this is good. But then, he said, but go further. So please understand this conversation with Ramananda Roy very properly. He didn't reject this, but he didn't accept it as an ultimate goal.
We have one or two more questions, but I wish to know.
It's probably enough for today. Please save it for the next time. I will be happy to answer. Maybe there are some more other questions which I didn't answer. I'll be happy to answer, but it's already late. I'm already almost.
So I request all those who have sent in the questions, please, if you can note them down and keep them for the next session. And we have some expressions from some devotees directly to you, so I want to read them out. This comes from Dinesh Kumar from Sharjah. Maharaj, you're really wonderful and all glories to you. Your Bhagavatam Katha is such that one is glued to listening to you. Thank you, Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances at your lotus feet. And then we have received Maharaj for you from Sunaja Mataji, Hare Krishna Maharaj. What an excellent explanation of how to develop internally, keeping a balance with the external. Please accept my humble obeisances. And Anupama Radharani Mataji, she expressed when you said that if we were bored to death, she said we could hear you 24/7. So on that note, I request all the other devotees whose questions could not be asked to kindly note them down, as I said, and we will certainly put it up to Maharaj in the next session. Can we have the next session on the 14th or the 21st of November?
Yeah, whatever you say, it's Saturday, right?
Yes, it will be Saturday.
14th. 14th.
Yes, 14th is not the week next, but the week after.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So our next sessions to all our viewers on the YouTube as well as on Zoom. So our next session will be 11 a.m. 14th of November. We'll send the invite in time. Guru Maharaj, thank you very much again for this wonderful session. And we look forward to your association on the 14th again. Hare
Okay.
Krishna.
Thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.